Overnight, for the first time, President Biden calling for a humanitarian pause in the Israel-Hamas war.
Mr. President.
After being interrupted by a protester demanding a ceasefire, the president responding, quote, "I think we need a pause."
In the face of increasing pressure, President Joe Biden refuses to call for a ceasefire. Instead, he engages in this nonsense BS effort to call for a humanitarian pause without really describing what that means. What is a humanitarian pause? Humanitarian pause meaning, hey, maybe we can get Israel to stop the bombardment, the aerial bombardment and the airstrikes that are killing literally thousands of civilians in the Gaza Strip, maybe for half a day, maybe for a day. Maybe we can get some humanitarian aid in, and then after that, Israel can continue. Is that what the humanitarian pause is? What is that? He stopped short of calling for a ceasefire because he doesn't believe in a ceasefire. Because this American government, a country that is supposed to be a superpower, is actually not able to make a moral, conscious decision about what Israel is doing right now. We just have to support everything that the right-wing Israeli government wants to do, even if it means that thousands of civilian lives will be lost. So, since then, by the way, 2 Democratic senators have called for a ceasefire. We're gonna get to those details in just a moment. Neither one of them are named Bernie Sanders, which is so incredibly depressing. But let's get back to Biden, then we'll get to the senators who are calling for a ceasefire. So he was giving a speech at a campaign fundraiser in Minnesota when a person who identified herself as Rabbi Jessica Rosenberg, she's with the Jewish Voices for Peace, interrupted his speech, and this is what she said to him.
Mr. President, if you care about Jewish people as a rabbi, I need you to call for a ceasefire right now.
Calling for a ceasefire, you can hear people in the audience telling her to get out, leave. Imagine being offended for calls for a ceasefire. Like, hey, we'd like the bloodshed to stop. Can we move toward a peaceful resolution here? Get out, get out. Man, these blood-hungry Americans in that room specifically. He responded to her by basically saying that he wants a humanitarian pause. Am I being too vicious here? Do you think a humanitarian pause makes sense in lieu of a ceasefire?
I think it makes sense for the PR campaign that they're trying with this. I think they're trying everything that they can do as far as public perception without actually doing the right thing. But I don't think it can last long. I don't know if you saw the protests that happened in Grand Central Station in New York. Many Jewish Americans were at the forefront of that protest calling for a ceasefire. Obviously in London, there were huge demonstrations in places like Turkey. And again, here's the thing, Anna, that I feel a little bit more heartened by is that even the coverage of this specific attack on Gaza just has a different tint than anything we've ever seen in the past. Just the idea that opposition to this brutality would appear at all on places like CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times is very new. So Joe Biden can be as politically inept, show as much political cowardice as he wants, but the tides are changing. And I think most importantly, Anna, that I would like people to think about, not just be heartened by so much of the demonstrations that have been happening, just an outcrying of people demanding peace. When Blinken went to Qatar and he's talking to the leaders over there, you kind of got the sense that they were like, look, bro, y'all can try to do this, but if y'all wanna have partners in this part of the world that are receptive to the things that y'all care about, y'all need to stop, because our people will rebel against us. I know that it seems like the Saudis and the Qataris and the Emiratis are these entrenched regimes, right? That used to be the case for the Shah in Iran too. That was our boy over there. And because of US-backed policies and repression, the people over there rose up. They ain't been allowed in those parts ever since. And so I really do truly believe that people in the Arab world are gonna have to bring some pressure to bear on the United States. Even those ridiculously brutal regimes, even they're gonna have to step up and be like, guys, we can't do this. Our people will not have us if we do this.
There are mass protests in Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt. The Arab world is on fire right now. Okay, this is, again, I've said it a billion times, I'm gonna say it again. We are barreling toward a giant regional war. And for everyone in that room who told that rabbi to sit down or get out, I really hope that they're enlisted in the military, because I think it would be wrong for the men and women in this country who do not co-sign to the brutality that is being carried out by the IDF as we speak. It would be unfair for them to go fight in those wars. So those who are egging the war on, I hope you got your war boots on. I hope you're enlisted. You better not be a chicken hawk, okay? They have no problem with the young men and women of this country fighting these disgusting wars that could have been prevented. Because hey, they're at a fundraiser in Minnesota. I'm gonna venture to say that these are moneyed interests. These are people living high off the hog. They don't have to worry about the consequences of that regional war. They get to sit in their cushy homes, they get to buy our politicians, and they get everything they want, as the rest of us suffer for the brutality that they egg on. That is what's happening in that room. That is who Biden is. The guy who looks at all that carnage in the Gaza Strip and provides cover for Netanyahu, a far-right Israeli politician who could not care less about human lives, including the human lives in his own goddamn country. Let's keep it real, okay? Couldn't be bothered to keep his own civilians safe, was too busy trying to take apart their democracy by disempowering their judiciary branch. Too busy with all of that to notice that there's a terrorist plot that he could have foiled if he was a little more focused. So hey, what a great way to stay in power. What a great way to get people's minds off of his dismantling of Israel's democracy. Just go ahead and bomb the crap out of the Gaza Strip. Who cares how many civilians die? It's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting.
Well, and I just want to hit on something that you said earlier that I think is important, right? You said people have a problem with you calling this ethnic cleansing.
What else is it?
There's
tell
no
me how
other
it's
way
not.
to describe it.
Yeah, tell me how it's not.
Again, if you want to look up the Zionist project, right? It's the idea that there should be a Jewish state. Some people who are new to an understanding of this conflict might say to themselves, well, why couldn't they just have had a state of Israel or whatever they wanted to call the state, and just included the indigenous population?
Can't do that.
Would defeat the purpose of having an ethno-Jewish state. That's the entire point of the project. It has to be a Jewish ran state. And so that's why these people are being excluded. It's because they're not Jewish. So the conflict in and of itself to begin with is the fact that they're not of that ethnicity. And so when you start doing more and more settlements in places like the West Bank to expand your state, and literally, because this is another thing, and I don't know that we have time to get into it. I think a lot of Americans, the way they get taught the concept of a settlement or a settler is these nice Puritans that came on the Mayflower and came to America, and they just built up their nice places and they put some churches in it and they made the Native Americans Christians. And it's the concept of a settler or a settlement is not pejorative. It has an innocuous ring to it to most Americans. But when they say people are settling the West Bank, what does that mean? The Israeli army comes, pushes a bunch of Palestinians out, kicks them out by brutal force, keeps the army there while they build it up. And that then expands the borders of the Israeli state. So they replace native Palestinians and put Israeli settlers to replace them. It's literally an ethnic cleansing. The reason why these folks are not being allowed to be part of the state of Israel is that they're not Jewish, because that's the entire point of a Zionist project. And again, there are people who will say, well, it's justified. Every time we've been in other people's states, we've been displaced, we got genocided by the Germans. And there are people that'll make that argument. And I don't want to argue that point with people. What I would say is you can't deny that this is an ethnic cleansing. The entire Zionist project is an ethnic one.
Listen, I don't think that a one-state solution is feasible in any way, shape, or form. I think that what's currently happening takes this whole situation, this entire conflict, a billion steps backwards, not forward. And my issue is, if you want a two-state solution, which I do, I think that the 1967 border should be recognized and honored. The problem is the borders weren't honored. I mean, even in recent years, how many stories did we did about the illegal settlements in the West Bank? There's no outrage about that, right? Here in the United States, no outrage about that. No outrage from Netanyahu. He loves the illegal settlements. He pursued the illegal settlements. So anyone who says, look, all we want is peace, okay? We want to honor the borders and we want a two-state solution. You can't say that while simultaneously supporting someone like Benjamin Netanyahu, who had no issue with Israelis building illegal settlements in the West Bank, which is not governed by Hamas. It's governed by the Palestinian Authority. And it's important that you know that, because as you see footage of what's happening to Palestinians in the West Bank today as a result of this war, don't let anyone lie to you and tell you that it's because of Hamas. Because even though it's governed by the Palestinian Authority, those Palestinian civilians in the West Bank are seen as subhuman. They've been treated as such. So the idea that the violence is one-sided, it's been one-sided, is laughable to say the least. It has not been one-sided. You need two parties to agree to peace for peace to exist. And peace means that you have two free states, okay? Not a free state and an occupied state, two free sovereign states. That should be the goal. But currently what the United States is co-signing to is the opposite of that. Now I want to get to the two senators who finally saw what's happening and realized, okay, I guess enough is enough. The first who spoke out today was, believe it or not, Senator Dick Durbin. So I want to go to that video. Let's watch.
I think a lot of people listening to people in power, President, you, Secretary Blinken calling for a humanitarian pause, are asking themselves, why is that different from a ceasefire? 2 years ago, 2021, during an escalation of violence between Israel and Gaza, you called for a ceasefire and you said you, quote, couldn't disagree more with Netanyahu's policies, quote, when it came to the treatment of Palestinians. Is a ceasefire needed now?
I think it is, at least in the context of both sides agreeing. For example, the release of those who have been kidnapped should be part of this, immediate release. That should be the beginning of it. An effort should be made to engage in conversation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Let's face it, this has gone on for decades. Whatever the rationale from the beginning, it has now reached an intolerable level. We need to have a resolution in the Middle East that gives some promise for the future.
Dick Durbin, not a progressive Democrat, not a democratic socialist like Senator Bernie Sanders, who has failed to call for a ceasefire. Much like President Joe Biden, he wants a humanitarian pause. The cowardice demonstrated by Bernie Sanders is so utterly depressing. Now we have another Democratic senator who called for a ceasefire soon after Dick Durbin did. Senator Chris Murphy with a newsy statement on Israel. Quote, it's time for Israel's friends to recognize that the current operational approach is causing an unacceptable level of civilian harm and does not appear likely to achieve the goal of permanently ending the threat from Hamas. In a subsequent tweet, Andrew Desiderio writes that Murphy, who's been in close touch with White House and the state about the war in Israel, says Israel should immediately reconsider its approach and shift to a more deliberate and proportionate counterterrorism campaign, surgically targeting Hamas and Islamic Jihad leaders and terrorist infrastructure. And that seems to be an admission that the IDF hasn't been engaging in these surgical strikes, that they've been pretty belligerent in indiscriminately bombing the Gaza Strip, including the south of the Strip, where Palestinian civilians were told to evacuate to for safety.
I mean, obviously, I'm just as dismayed as you are by Senator Sanders' refusal to get in the fight right now. It just seems like he never wants to completely go against Joe Biden.
True.
Whatever influence that he may have within the administration, it's predicated on him not coming out and publicly killing the guy ever. And so I think that's what we're seeing here. He's been kind of attached to Joe Biden at the hip. Some would say he's the administration's leftward flank. But the strings that come with that is that he doesn't come out and just oppose him as he should right now in a situation that's as dire as anything that's faced the administration since Biden got elected. So I'm not surprised by that. But again, shouts to Dick Durbin and Senator Murphy for coming out and calling for what's right, and that's an end to the bombings.
Absolutely.
Thanks for watching. If you become a member, you get to watch all this ad-free, except for, of course, this ad. Still, hit the join button below.